More than a year after the Israel-Hamas war began, Israeli Defense Forces have killed Yahya Sinwar, the alleged mastermind behind the 7th October attack on Israeli soil. Israel's military shared a drone footage of Sinwar sitting in a dilapidated apartment in Rafah just minutes before he was killed. Hamas also confirmed Sinwar's death. Sinwar joined Hamas in the 1980s and rose through the ranks over the years. He was elevated as Hamas's top leader after Ismail Haniyeh was allegedly killed by Iran by Israel in August. He worked on bringing Hamas closer to Iran and its other allies, including Lebanon's Hezbollah. But does his death mean the end of the war in Gaza? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared this as the beginning of the end and said that the war would continue until the remaining hostages are brought home. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron have urged the Israeli Prime Minister to progress towards a ceasefire. Iran said Sinwar's killing will strengthen the spirit of resistance. Let me now go across to Major Doron Spielman, international spokesperson of the Israeli Defense Forces. Major Spielman, thank you very much for joining us. Let me begin by asking you, tell us how this operation against the Hamas chief was actually carried out.
So first of all, Parikshit, thank you very much for having me. Our forces have been looking for, of course, Yahya Sinwar, for months since the October 7th attack, where he carried out the largest massacre in Israeli history, the largest single killing of Jews since the Holocaust. He directed thousands of people to go into our country, over our border, and literally rip parents from their beds, killing them in front of their children, killing children in front of their parents. And he has been, of course, a major target of Israel since that time. 2 days ago, our troops were operating on routine measures in southern Gaza, where we had intelligence that there were major military Hamas terrorist leaders in that area. We were cordoning them off by closing their area of operation, by taking out terror tunnels, blocking roads, removing whatever obstacles were in the way, hoping that those terrorists would flee the tunnels and try to seek shelter in buildings by acting like fugitives. And in fact, Yahya Sinwar, as you're showing on the screen, he left the tunnel, he went into an abandoned building, the one that you're looking at right now, and he was there with 2 other terrorists. Our troops have been carrying out intelligence-based raids for weeks. They identified 3 terrorists. They approached the building. Upon doing so, they came under grenades, so they withdrew from the building. A tank round hit the building, at which point these terrorists split up into 2 groups. 2 terrorists went in one direction to another building that was targeted, and this terrorist, we found out later to be Yahya Sinwar, went into this building on the 2nd floor. He looks a little bit stunned, perhaps he's injured, and as our drone came closer, he threw an object at our drone. Afterwards, our drone moved out of the way, and another tank round was fired at this building, eliminating Yahya Sinwar and making the world just a little bit of a better place.
Right. Thank you for explaining us the entire process. Give us a sense of how the Israeli military has been planning on eliminating Yahya Sinwar for the last 1 year, kind of work that has gone into it.
Look, we have been gaining a lot of intelligence on Yahya Sinwar, which wasn't easy because he had no digital footprint whatsoever. He stayed away from all electronic devices. He operated only based on couriers, trusted couriers. And in fact, the only footage that we have of him was 1 camera that was placed in the tunnel almost close to a year ago after the October 7th attack. But we were aware that he had moved to southern Gaza to the area of Rafah. Now, Rafah is an area where even many of our allies around the world, countries around the world, said to Israel, you've got no business going into Rafah. Nothing good will come out of Rafah. There's too many people in Rafah, and it will take you months to clear out the civilian population. In fact, it only took Israel 2 weeks. The civilian population was carefully moved to a humanitarian zone, and we've been carrying out actions in that area, hoping to root out these criminals. Now, what worked was the plan of narrowing the corridors by which he can operate and forcing him out of those terror dungeons. That's exactly what happened. As soon as he left those terror dungeons, regular routine patrols of the IDF, not knowing this was Sinwar, but operating in general intelligence and very good IDF actions, managed to target and kill him. And as luck would have it, this was the most wanted man.
All right. My final set of questions now. What do you think this moment really means for the war against Hamas? if he was the person, the architect of the 7th October attack last year, has the biggest aim of the war been achieved, or does the war continue?
I think that this sends a very important message, not only to Hamas, but to every terrorist that threatens the state of Israel, whether it is a terrorist regime like Iran, which stands at the top of the pyramid, or the Houthis or Hezbollah. You may run, you may hide behind innocent civilians, you may even go down into tunnels. But one day we will find you and you will face the consequences of your actions. Every terrorist who threatens Israel knows that's the case. There will be no holding off in bringing you to justice. That message for a terrorist is extremely important that they hear. There's a price to pay. And I think the world needs to unite around this and not allow evil to grow. If we stand together and we nip evil while it's young, before it grows into a beast, we can have taken out a Hamas when it was this big, as opposed to waiting for it to get this big. It's a very important lesson. We don't like to go to war. The United States doesn't want to go to war. India doesn't want to go to war. But sometimes when you see a cancer growing, you've got to strike it when it's still small enough. That's the message.
Right. Okay, you left us with that message, but what about the war? Do you think that continues, or are we going to see an end to the war now?
Look, we've been waiting for an end to the war since October 8th, when we offered terms for the end of the war. The terms are very clear, and this is the day before the day after. You're asking me about the day after. The day before the day after means three things have to happen. 101 hostages, which, as you and I speak, are in terror dungeons deep beneath the ground with barely any air and barely any food. They have to come home. Number two, Hamas has to be completely dismantled and dismembered. And number three, all threats against Israeli cities, shelling of Israeli cities, has to end. If the elimination of Sinwar brings about these possibilities and perhaps enables Gazan people who are looking more towards peace as opposed towards terror, moving into a position of control, then we are considerably closer to achieving that goal. But if we do not think of the day before and we jump just to the day after, that is an illusion that will enable our enemies time to regroup and attack us again. We must not let that happen.
All right. All right. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So let's see what happens in the days to come. Of course, we're looking at a very tense situation in Gaza and the Middle East right now, and all eyes on what happens in the weeks ahead. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. The news continues on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned.